The exhibition. The invitation nobody wanted. The Galactic Art Collective had existed for 12,000 years. In that time, it had catalogued the artistic achievements of 847 different species, preserving masterworks that ranged from living sculptures made of pure light to symphonies that could only be heard across multiple dimensions. The collective's museum on the world of Aesthetica Prime was considered the greatest cultural treasure in known space. When humanity applied for membership after 60 years of spaceflight, the response was immediate and dismissive. Humans lack the sophistication necessary for true artistic expression, wrote curator Valshera, a being made of crystallized thought whose own species had been creating art for 40 millennia. Their works are crude, simplistic, and utterly derivative of their limited biological perspective. The rejection letter was published across the galactic network. Most species agreed with the assessment. Humans were young, barely civilized, still fighting wars among themselves. What could they possibly contribute to the grand tradition of galactic art? But there was one provision in the collective's charter that even Valshera could not ignore. Any species could demand a formal exhibition if they provided the resources for it. And if just one work was deemed worthy of preservation, they would be granted full membership. Director Sarah Chen of Earth's Cultural Ministry read the charter carefully. Then she sent a message to Aesthetica Prime: humanity accepts your challenge. We will provide our exhibition within one standard year. The mockery begins. The announcement spread quickly. Across the galaxy, beings of art and culture laughed. Human art? The species that had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel wanted to compete with civilizations that had perfected artistic expression over millions of years? On Aesthetica Prime, curator Valshera received the news with what might have been amusement, if crystallized thought could feel such things. She allocated the smallest exhibition hall for the human display, a room barely large enough for a few dozen visitors, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the museum. Let them embarrass themselves, she told her staff. Perhaps the humiliation will teach them humility. But Sarah Chen was not planning to be humiliated. She was planning something else entirely. She assembled a team: Dr. Marcus Webb, an art historian who had spent 40 years studying alien aesthetics, Yuki Tanaka, a neuroscientist who specialized in perception and consciousness, and James Okonkwo, an engineer with expertise in quantum field manipulation. What we need, Sarah told them at their first meeting, is not to compete with alien art on their terms. We need to show them something they've never seen before. Something uniquely human. What do humans have that 12,000 years of galactic civilization lacks? Marcus asked. Sarah smiled. Pain. The preparation. The team worked in secret for 11 months. They studied every known form of alien art, analyzing what made each species' work unique. The Veltrani created sculptures of pure mathematics, equations so beautiful they could make observers weep. The core made music from stellar radiation, composing with the death songs of stars. The mirror painted with emotions themselves, creating canvases that made viewers feel specific complex feelings. But in all their research, they found one constant: alien art was about beauty, harmony, perfection. Even works that dealt with conflict or darkness did so from a place of resolution, of lessons learned, of meaning found. They've never known true despair, Yuki realized. Most of these species evolved on gentle worlds, or they edited suffering out of their consciousness millions of years ago, or they simply don't process trauma the way humans do. So what do we show them? James asked. Sarah pulled up an image on her screen. It was a painting from Earth's history, Picasso's Guernica, created in response to the bombing of a Spanish town during humanity's ancient wars. We show them what it means to suffer and survive, she said. We show them what it means to create beauty from horror. We show them what makes human art human. The team began construction of their exhibition. Not just paintings or sculptures, but something more. They used quantum field generators to create what James called emotional resonance chambers, spaces where the neurological patterns of human emotion could be projected and experienced by any consciousness capable of perceiving them. It's not mind control, Yuki explained to Sarah's concerned questions. It's more like translation. We're taking the emotional context that a human would feel when viewing the art, and making it accessible to alien neurology. They'll feel what we feel. Will it hurt them? Yuki hesitated. I don't know. Human emotions are apparently more intense than most species experience. But it shouldn't cause permanent damage. Probably. Sarah approved the project anyway. They had come too far to turn back now. The opening night. The exhibition opened on a standard Thursday evening by galactic calendar. Delshera had not bothered to attend personally, sending a junior curator named Thexelon in her place. The collective had advertised the event minimally, expecting few visitors. But word had spread through the galactic network that humanity was attempting something unusual. Curiosity brought hundreds of beings from dozens of species. They arrived expecting to laugh at primitive human efforts, to confirm their own superiority, to witness the inevitable failure of the young species. The exhibition hall had been transformed. The walls were black, absorbing light. The floor seemed to disappear into darkness. And in the center of the room hung a single painting. It was called The Survivor. Sarah's team had commissioned it from an artist named Elena Rodriguez, a woman who had lived through Earth's last Great War, a conflict that had killed 2 billion people before humanity finally achieved global peace. The painting showed a child standing in rubble. That was all. A small figure, maybe 6 years old, surrounded by the ruins of what had once been a city. The child's face was turned upward, looking at something beyond the frame. Her expression was impossible to read. Was it hope? Despair? Defiance? Acceptance? The painting itself was unremarkable by galactic standards. Competent technique, nothing revolutionary. Several species had visual art far more technically impressive. But the painting sat within one of Yuki's emotional resonance chambers. When the first visitor, a core musician named Sha'ival, stepped close enough to trigger the field, something happened that no one had predicted. The breaking. Sha'ival stopped walking. His bioluminescent skin, which normally glowed with soft blue harmonies, flickered and went dark. He stood frozen, staring at the painting. After 30 seconds, he began to make a sound. The core communicate primarily through complex musical tones, but this was nothing like their usual speech. It was a single note, held impossibly long, rising and falling in a pattern that hurt to hear. Other core in the room recognized it immediately, their species' expression of inconsolable grief. But none of them had heard it performed with such raw intensity in millennia. Their species had evolved past such deep suffering thousands of years ago. Security tried to approach Sha'ival, but Thexelon stopped them. The junior curator was staring at the musician with growing alarm. What is he experiencing? Sarah stepped forward. She had been waiting in the shadows, watching. He's feeling what the child in the painting felt. He's experiencing human trauma. That's impossible. The core don't. The core don't experience deep emotional pain anymore, Sarah interrupted. But they still have the capacity for it, buried in their neurology. The resonance field is activating it. More visitors approached the painting. A Veltrani philosopher whose crystallized thoughts began to fracture and reform in chaotic patterns. A Mira empath who collapsed, overwhelmed by emotions their species had never developed words for. A Drax warrior whose genetic modifications made them incapable of fear, until now. Within an hour, the exhibition had to be shut down. 23 visitors required medical attention. Dozens more fled the room in distress. And curator Velshera, who had finally arrived to see what the emergency was about, stood before the painting with something that might have been horror in her crystalline matrix. "What have you done?" she whispered. Sarah met her gaze calmly. "We showed you art. Human art. The kind that comes from surviving the unsurvivable. The kind that comes from creating beauty in spite of horror. The kind your species forgot was possible." Delshera looked back at the painting. At the child in the rubble. At the expression that could not be named because it contained too many contradictions. "This is not art," she said finally. This is a weapon. No, Sarah replied. This is what happens when you ask humanity to share our culture. We warned you we were different. You chose not to listen. The aftermath. The scandal. By the next morning, recordings of the exhibition had spread across the galactic network. The collective tried to suppress them, but the damage was done. Beings from 100 species watched in fascination and horror as sophisticated, evolved aliens broke down emotionally before a simple human painting. The debate started immediately. Was human art dangerous? Should it be banned? Did humanity have the right to create works that could cause psychological harm to other species? But beneath the panic, something else was happening. Beings who had lived for centuries without feeling anything deeper than mild contentment were discovering that they had been missing something. The experience was terrible, yes, but it was also real in a way that nothing in their comfortable existence had been real for a very long time. A Veltrani poet named Kreshtar published an essay that went viral across the network. For 12,000 years, we have created art about beauty, harmony, and enlightenment. We have congratulated ourselves on evolving past the primitive emotions that troubled our ancestors. But in doing so, we have created art that is technically perfect and spiritually empty. The humans, who we dismissed as crude and unsophisticated, have shown us what we lost. Curator Velshera tried to maintain the collective's position that human art was unsuitable for preservation. But her authority was crumbling. Artists from across the galaxy were demanding access to the exhibition. They wanted to feel what the humans had made them feel. They wanted to understand this strange species that created beauty from trauma. The demand. 3 weeks after the exhibition opened and closed, an unprecedented thing happened. 47 species formally petitioned the collective to grant humanity full membership immediately, bypassing the usual evaluation process. The petition read, "We have assessed human artistic expression and found it to be not merely worthy of preservation, but essential to understanding the full spectrum of creative consciousness. Humanity has demonstrated a form of art that the galaxy has forgotten or never known. To exclude them would be to diminish us all." Velshera had no choice. The charter was clear. Humanity was granted membership. But Sarah Chen was not finished. The archive. Now that we're members, she told the collective's board at their first joint meeting, "I'd like to propose something. A new wing of the museum. A permanent collection dedicated to art created from suffering." The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, a core representative spoke. "You want to institutionalize pain?" "I want to remember it," Sarah corrected. "Your species, all of your species, evolved past suffering. You edited it out of your DNA or your culture or your consciousness. But humanity can't do that. We carry our trauma with us, generation after generation. The only thing we can do is transform it into something meaningful. Into art." She pulled up images on the conference room display. Paintings from Earth's history, Goya's war series, the works of Holocaust survivors, art created in refugee camps and war zones and places of unspeakable horror. "This is what humans do," she said. "We suffer, and we create. We break, and we rebuild. We experience the worst that existence can offer, and we make beauty from it anyway. Not in spite of the pain, but because of it." A long silence followed. Then Kreshtar, the Veltrani poet, spoke. "I support this proposal. My species spent millions of years eliminating suffering from our experience. We thought we were becoming enlightened. But we were just becoming empty. Perhaps it is time to remember what we were." The vote was not unanimous, but it passed. Construction began on the Archive of Necessary Pain, a new wing of the museum dedicated to art created from trauma, suffering, and survival. The transformation. Over the following years, something unexpected happened. The archive became the most visited location in the museum. Beings from across the galaxy came to experience emotions they had forgotten or never known. They stood before human paintings and sculptures and installations, letting the resonance fields translate human suffering into something their alien neurology could process. It was not comfortable. Many visitors left in distress. Some required counseling afterward. A few species banned their citizens from visiting, declaring human art to be a psychological hazard. But many more came anyway, seeking something they couldn't quite name. A sense of depth. A feeling of reality. A reminder that existence was more than comfortable beauty and perfect harmony. The archive expanded beyond human works. Artists from other species began creating what they called remembrance art, works that drew on their own forgotten histories of suffering, conflict, and survival. The Veltrani created sculptures about the wars their ancestors had fought before achieving crystalline consciousness. The Cork composed music based on the primitive grief songs their species had abandoned millennia ago. The Mira painted the raw, unprocessed emotions that their empathic abilities usually filtered out. A new movement emerged, primitivism, they called it, though the name was somewhat ironic. It wasn't about being primitive. It was about remembering that sophistication without depth was just emptiness. The student. 5 years after the exhibition, a young Veltrani named Chakras came to Earth. She had been one of the visitors that first night, one of those whose crystalline matrix had fractured under the weight of human emotion. The experience had changed her. I want to learn, she told Sarah Chen at their meeting in Geneva. I want to understand how humans create art from pain. My people have forgotten how to do this. I think we need to remember. Sarah studied the alien carefully. Chakras's crystalline form showed patterns of intentional imperfection, cracks and flaws she had apparently cultivated rather than repaired. Why? Sarah asked. Your species is happy. You've eliminated suffering. Why would you want to bring it back? Chakras's form shifted, colors flickering through her matrix. Because happiness without the possibility of sadness is not happiness. It is just numbness. I felt something that night in the museum. It was terrible. It hurt in ways I didn't know were possible. But it was also real. And I realized I had never felt anything real before. Sarah nodded slowly. Learning to create art from pain is not easy. It requires you to sit with trauma, to understand it, to transform it without diminishing it. Can your species do that? I don't know. But I need to try. So began an exchange program that would eventually involve hundreds of alien artists coming to Earth to study human methods. They painted in war memorials and wrote poetry in hospitals and composed music in places where terrible things had happened. Many failed. The weight of human emotion was too much for beings who had evolved past suffering. They broke down, unable to process what they were experiencing. But some succeeded. They learned to create works that captured a fraction of what human art had always contained, the acknowledgement that existence was difficult, that beauty often emerged from horror, and that survival itself was a form of art. The legacy. 10 years after the exhibition, the Galactic Art Collective had fundamentally changed. The old categories, beauty, harmony, enlightenment, remained, but they were now seen as incomplete. The archive of necessary pain had become a central part of the museum, not a curiosity in the corner. Del Shera, who had once dismissed human art as crude and worthless, published a formal apology. We were wrong, her statement read. We mistook technical sophistication for depth, and we mistook the absence of pain for enlightenment. Humanity taught us that true art requires the willingness to confront darkness, not just celebrate light. We are grateful for this lesson, however uncomfortable it made us. Sarah Chen, now elderly, stood in the archive one last day before her retirement. Around her, alien visitors experienced emotions their species had tried to forget. Some wept, though their tears were not made of water. Some made sounds of grief in frequencies humans couldn't hear. Some simply stood in silence, processing feelings they had no words for. A young human artist approached her, Maya Rodriguez, granddaughter of Elena who had painted the survivor. They're saying we broke the galaxy's understanding of art, Maya said. They're saying we destroyed 12,000 years of artistic tradition. Sarah smiled. We didn't destroy it. We reminded them that it was incomplete. Art isn't just about beauty. It's about truth. And the truth is that existence is hard, and we suffer, and we survive. Every species knew that once, before they evolved past it. We just helped them remember. Maya looked at her own painting on the wall, a piece about climate refugees, created in the distinctive style that had become known as human trauma art. Do you think they understand it? Really understand it? Some do. Some never will. But that's okay. Art isn't about universal understanding. It's about honest expression. We express honestly. That's all we can do. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching aliens learn to feel pain for the first time in millennia, watching the galaxy remember what it meant to suffer and survive and create beauty anyway. And in the center of the archive, the survivor still hung in its resonance field. The child in the rubble still looked upward with that indescribable expression. And visitors still stopped before it, experiencing something they had forgotten was possible. Humanity had not set out to break the galaxy's artistic traditions. They had simply shared their culture honestly, without apology or compromise. That the sharing broke something in their audience was not humanity's fault. It was the audience's burden to carry, the burden of realizing that they had been living incomplete lives, creating incomplete art, existing in an incomplete understanding of what consciousness could feel. The humans had reminded them of something important, that beauty means more when you've known ugliness, that joy is deeper when you've experienced sorrow, and that art created from safety is always hollow compared to art created from survival. The galaxy had called human art worthless. But in the end, it was alien art that had been worthless, technically perfect, spiritually empty, missing the one ingredient that made creation meaningful. Human art had pain. And pain, it turned out, was the most valuable thing the galaxy had forgotten.